I was 3 steps from the bedroom door when I heard her say it. Her voice, sticky with wine and sarcasm, slithered through the crack like smoke from a house already burning. I invited Kyle, hope he shows. I spent all day shaving everywhere for him. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed sharp, immediate, surgical. The kind of sentence you don't mishear because your brain, in some screwed up attempt to protect you, records it in perfect clarity. A few seconds of silence followed, then a tidal wave of laughter from the bridesmaids. High-pitched, mean, the kind of laughter that doesn't laugh with, but at. My hand was still raised to knock, not because I wanted to interrupt her night, just to ask about tomorrow's breakfast. The breakfast in bed tradition she'd insisted on. Blueberry pancakes, hot syrup, the dumb little heart-shaped butter pads she loved. I was going to ask if she preferred coffee or tea in the morning. That's it. That's what I'd come up to check on. But instead, I stood frozen outside a door she didn't know I was behind, listening to the woman I was supposed to marry joke about preparing her body for another man. You'd expect rage, or tears, or maybe some half-drunken charge into the room demanding an explanation. I did none of that. I turned, walked down the stairs, and felt something colder than anger settle in. Not the heat of betrayal, but the frost of calculation. Our wedding was supposed to be in less than 24 hours. Everything was arranged, small guest list, local venue, cupcake tower instead of a cake because cakes are outdated and overpriced. She wanted minimalist elegance. We compromised on a shared Spotify playlist instead of a DJ. We designed the program ourselves. God, I even learned how to tie that ridiculous sage green tie to match her bridesmaids' dresses. But now, none of it mattered, because she hadn't just said something flirty or stupid. She'd shown me, out loud and with an audience, who she really was. Not just a woman who made a mistake. A woman who, on the eve of her wedding, still prioritized attention from the man before me, who celebrated that she had done something gross, disrespectful, and humiliating, and got applause for it. I sat on the couch downstairs in the dark for maybe 5 minutes. Didn't even move. The last candle was still flickering in the kitchen where I'd been setting up her surprise. A framed photo of our first date next to her favorite breakfast mug with "Let's make this forever" written in cursive along the rim. Subtle, sweet, my version of a send-off. I slid it all off the counter in one quiet sweep and dropped it into the trash. Then I pulled out my phone. I didn't call her. I didn't text her. I didn't do what 97% of people do when they hear something like that. Explode, spiral, lose control. I just started typing. Cold, focused. First, my lawyer. He'd helped draft the prenup, mostly at her insistence. Just in case, she'd said, laughing like she was joking. I told him we might need to activate Clause 3.3. He replied within minutes. Understood. Need confirmation in writing. Second, my landlord. I asked about terminating the lease early. He was sympathetic, even offered help. I told him she'd be out by Monday. The locks would need to be changed Sunday night. Third, hotel booking, just for 2 nights. Not because I needed space, but because I wanted her to wake up alone and realize she wasn't welcome anywhere anymore. Not in my life, not in my home, not even in the fantasy she thought she'd curated. By the time her laughter died upstairs, I had already canceled our joint Spotify account and started backing up our shared Google Drive. The wedding planner's number went in the blocked list. Her father's email address, where the final vendor invoices had been sent, got a new message. There will be no wedding. Please confirm receipt. The man she thought was always 2 steps behind her, he was now 20 steps ahead. If you've ever been the guy who paid for everything, waited patiently, played it safe, subscribe. Because apparently more than 97% of you don't. And trust me, seeing that number drop while writing this, that motivates the hell out of us. Anyway, at 1:37 a.m., I walked past the cupcake tower and extinguished the last candle. My phone buzzed, a hotel confirmation, room ready. I grabbed a bag, just one, and I left. Quietly. No note, no theatrics, no scene. She would discover it all in the morning, but by then I wouldn't be there. And neither would the man she thought she could keep on standby while shaving herself for another. At 7:03 a.m., Sarah blinked her way into consciousness, her lashes sticky with last night's mascara, in smug, champagne-induced satisfaction. She stretched across the bed, already picturing the sweet, humble smell of pancakes drifting in from the kitchen. Greg would have brewed the dark roast she liked, poured the orange juice into those little crystal tumblers from his grandmother, laid out her favorite mug with the silly Bridezilla logo she pretended to hate. He'd probably even arranged a flower or two on the tray. Baby's breath, knowing him. But the house was dead quiet. No coffee brewing, no dishes clinking, no low hum of acoustic guitar coming from the Bluetooth speaker he always queued up. Just silence. Thick, clinical, final. She sat up, slightly annoyed. "Greg?" she called out, stretching her voice just enough to reach the hallway. Nothing. The note was so still and clean on the nightstand, it didn't even look real. A single sheet of thick ivory paper folded in half with her name in his handwriting so calm it chilled her. She opened it. No good morning. No, sorry. Just this. "You said you shaved for Kyle. I won't compete. Keys are deactivated. Your name is no longer on the lease. I'll cancel the wedding. Don't worry." There wasn't a single emotional word in it. No name calling, no how could you, no plea for an explanation. Just a list of completed actions. Final. Administrative. Like a memo from a man she no longer had access to. She tried calling him, once and twice. By the third try, the number was no longer in service. Still in her robe, she stomped barefoot down the stairs, her voice rising. "Greg, seriously, where are you?" She pulled open the pantry as if he might be crouching in it. Nothing. The coffee pot was spotless. Dishwasher empty. No breakfast prep. No note on the fridge. Nothing. "Guys," she called toward the guest room. The bridesmaids were already half-dressed and clustered in a whispering huddle. Her friend Talia had Greg's shared calendar open on her iPad. Sarah?" Talia's voice wavered. "Did you change the wedding schedule?" "What?" Sarah snapped. Talia turned the screen toward her. The event labeled Greg and Sarah's wedding ceremony was no longer there. In its place, a gray block, one word, revoked. Her stomach sank, then flipped entirely. The air seemed heavier. For a second, she actually wondered if she was still drunk from the night before. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe he was making a point. But no, Greg wasn't dramatic. He didn't do statements. He did spreadsheets. He did structure. If Greg had erased himself, then that was permanent. Talia's face had gone pale. "Did you say something last night? I mean, I don't want to stir things, but we were loud." Sarah stared at her, but didn't answer. Her mind was already replaying the moment, the exact moment she'd said it. "I invited Kyle. Hope he shows. I spent all day shaving everywhere for him." And then her laugh, that smug, smug laugh. It had felt harmless in the moment. Edgy, flirty, the kind of thing you say with wine in your hand and a veil on your head, surrounded by people who enable your worst instincts. She hadn't expected him to hear it. She hadn't expected it to cost her everything. "Maybe his phone died," one of the other bridesmaids suggested too brightly. Sarah rushed to her laptop, opened the shared Dropbox folder with their wedding vendors. A red error popped up. Folder removed by owner. She opened their shared budgeting sheet. Access denied. Greg had vanished like smoke through a vent, but not before slamming every door on his way out and locking them from the other side. She opened their email thread with the venue coordinator. Gone. Replaced with an auto-response from the venue. "The wedding of Greg and Sarah has been officially canceled. Refunds processed to card on file. Best wishes." Best wishes. Her fingers trembled as she closed the laptop. There wasn't even anger to grab onto, just this deep, suffocating sense that the ground had quietly opened under her. Sarah turned to the girls, her voice suddenly hoarse. "He left. Wait, like, for now?" "No." Her voice dropped into a whisper. "He left me." And upstairs, on the pillow where his head should have been, her diamond engagement ring now sat by itself, nestled in the same velvet box she'd thrown into a drawer months ago, calling it a dumb tradition. Apparently, he agreed. At 11:56 a.m., Sarah's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She swiped it without thinking, still in her robe, mascara smudged, her hair matted from sweat and pillow creases. "Hi, this is Amanda from Greenpoint Venue," a too-chipper voice began. "We just received a wedding cancellation request through the groom's legal representative and, well, we just wanted to verify before we process anything. Is this a prank?" Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came out. She wasn't sure which part of the sentence hit harder, cancellation or legal representative. She stalled, fumbling for control. No, there must be a misunderstanding, she said, voice dry. We had a slight delay. He's just being overly cautious. You know how grooms get sometimes. There was a pause on the line, long enough for the venue manager to process the pathetic tap dance in real time. I see, Amanda said, voice stiffening. Well, his counsel was very specific. All accounts tied to his name have been closed. Just want to make sure you aren't expecting any services this afternoon because we've already released the staff. Click. Sarah stared at the screen. No goodbyes. Just a closed line. She opened the vendor spreadsheet only to realize Greg must have revoked her access again. Fine. She started calling from memory. The florist. I'm sorry, but the final invoice didn't clear. We've reallocated the arrangements. I believe the payment account was terminated. The photographer. We received a cease and desist to remove all images related to the engagement portfolio from our site. The caterer. We never got the updated menu confirmation. Honestly, we assumed it was off. Each call scraped another layer of skin off her pride. The women around her, the same ones who'd cackled the night before when she bragged about Kyle, were now hovering just out of reach. Awkward, restless, watching the spiraling in real time. No one laughed now. No one knew what to say. By the time she stood outside Greg's condo at 2:40 p.m., still wearing her rushed leggings and oversized hoodie, her heels dangling from her fingers, she wasn't sure what she was even hoping for. That he'd be inside slouched on the couch, hurt but willing to hear her out. That this had been a grand overreaction she could cry her way through. Her keycard blinked red. She tried again. Red. Again. Still red. Then she saw him. Not Greg. The man inside. Mid-50s, crew cut, tan security uniform. Standing silently in the entryway. Just behind the glass. He didn't flinch when she knocked. I'm here to see Greg. He's my fiancé. Or, she swallowed. Just let him know I'm here, please. The man didn't move. Then finally he spoke. Flat. Professional. Mr. Callahan instructed us not to permit entry to anyone. Especially you. Excuse me? She snapped, trying to shove the door. It didn't budge. Do you even know who I am? He didn't blink. Yes, ma'am, that's why I'm here. That hit harder than she thought it would. She stood on that porch for another 3 minutes, long enough for a neighbor to walk by, glance at her, then look away quickly like he didn't want to get involved, long enough for the realization to bloom fully. He hadn't just blocked her number. He hadn't just called off the wedding. He'd erased her from the house, from the vendors, from the shared plans and accounts. She didn't just lose Greg. She lost access to the entire version of her future she thought was locked in. And now the security guard, this faceless soldier of Greg's sudden detachment, was standing there enforcing a line she didn't even know had been drawn. Back in the car, her phone buzzed again. A bridesmaid group chat pinged. New message. Wait, the whole thing's canceled? The replies poured in fast. OMG, what happened? Is this about Kyle? Girl, you didn't actually say that to him, did you? And just like that, the shame moved from silent to social. The same girls who egged her on last night now backpedaled in real time, rewriting themselves as bystanders to a meltdown no one wanted to be associated with. Sarah sat there in the car for nearly an hour, watching the building, waiting for something, movement, explanation, maybe just Greg's face through the window. But the blinds stayed down, the buzzer ignored. The security man never looked away from the lobby camera. It wasn't just over. It had been stripped, scrubbed, processed through the cold machine of logistics and execution. Her wedding hadn't been canceled. It had been deleted. Brunch was supposed to be damage control, her chance to spin it. A little charm. A few well-placed lies, and maybe a wistful mention of cold feet or a family emergency. Something vague enough to cover the crater Greg left, but human enough to buy her sympathy. Instead, it felt like she was walking into a courtroom where everyone already knew the verdict. The restaurant was painfully cheerful, one of those rooftop spots with overpriced mimosas and golden hour lighting that made your hangover feel performative. The bridesmaids were already seated when she arrived, each wearing the same strained smile and oversized sunglasses. Not because of the sun, but because no one wanted to make real eye contact. No one asked how she was. No one hugged her. Sarah slid into the booth, tossed her phone on the table like it didn't matter, and tried to smile like nothing was on fire. "Okay," she said, voice too bright. "Are we pretending yesterday didn't happen, or should we just get blackout drunk again and call it healing?" A couple chuckles. Tight, perfunctory. Talia, sitting directly across from her, sipped her mimosa and set it down with precision. Then she leaned forward. Not mean, not confrontational, just curious, surgical. "Did you really say that about Kyle?" she asked quietly. "At your own bachelorette party?" Sarah blinked. "What?" "You know what I mean." "I mean, it was a joke," Sarah said, waving a hand. "You were there. We were all just being stupid and flirty, and it wasn't that serious." The table went quiet. "Sure," said Jen, one of the quieter girls, finally speaking. "But you weren't whispering, and he was right there." Sarah's skin prickled. "I didn't know he was," she muttered. And again, "It wasn't like I meant anything by it." "Oh, okay," said Talia, dry. "So you shaved for Kyle just, what, symbolically?" The sarcasm wasn't even hidden. Sarah stared at her. "Jesus, you're turning on me now." "No one's turning on anyone," Jen said softly. "It's just, Greg didn't make a scene. He didn't trash you. He didn't rage post or send angry messages. He just disappeared. That silence, it's louder than any blow-up would have been. And everyone noticed," Talia added. "People are talking." Sarah gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale. "Talking about what?" Talia looked at her like she was stupid. "About why a guy like Greg would cancel a wedding midday and vanish without a word. And then people started remembering the exact thing you said the night before, which, by the way, half of us didn't even react to because we thought you were joking. But now, it's the only thing that makes sense." Her chest tightened. "No one knows for sure, Sarah," another bridesmaid said, trying to soften it. "But they know something happened. And when people don't have facts, they use tone. They remember the way you laughed, the way you said his name, Kyle, like it was dessert." Sarah pushed back her chair a little too hard, the scrape of metal on tile cutting through the chatter of other tables. "You're all acting like I murdered someone." "No one said that," Jen replied gently. "But you lit a match, and now you're mad that there's smoke." Sarah left before the entrees arrived. In the Uber, she unlocked her phone and stared at the screen. No new texts, no returned calls. She had tried his number. Dead. His parents. "We have nothing to say to you." His best friend sent a one-line reply. "Don't contact me again." That one stung. She had helped that friend move into his apartment, had made him soup when he was sick, and now she was radioactive. By the time she got home, her phone was buzzing again, this time with Instagram tags. One of Greg's cousins had posted a wedding day throwback, a photo from 6 months ago, the two of them laughing together during cake testing. Captioned, "Some people plan a wedding, others dodge a bullet." Her name wasn't mentioned, but the comments knew, everyone knew. Someone had leaked the bachelorette party audio, not a full recording, just a clip, 12 seconds. Enough. Her voice slurred and smug. "I invited Kyle. Hope he shows. I spent all day shaving everywhere for him." It wasn't even the words that wrecked her now. It was the tone that told everyone this wasn't a woman excited to be married. This was a woman performing commitment like it was cosplay. Greg didn't expose her. He just opened the door and let the truth walk out by itself. The knock came at 9:12 a.m. sharp. No buzz, no doorbell, just 3 firm taps. Professional. Sarah, still in the robe she hadn't bothered changing out of in 2 days, cracked open the door to find a courier holding a thick, flat envelope and a clipboard. "Signature?" he asked, already bored. She scribbled something illegible and took the envelope like it was a dead bird. The moment the door clicked shut, her stomach twisted. It wasn't from the venue or her parents or one of the vendors she desperately tried to recontact. The return label read, "Callahan and Trent LLP, Greg's lawyers," the same firm that handled the prenup she'd laughed through during the wine night, calling it adorably unnecessary. Apparently it wasn't. She opened it on the kitchen counter, carefully at first, as if it might contain something fragile. In a way, it did. The first page, formal wedding cancellation. Mutual notification clause executed. Signed, dated, filed. No emotion, no commentary. The second, joint liability waiver. It essentially confirmed that any debts, obligations, or payments previously agreed upon jointly were now split and rendered void. In simple terms, she was on her own. The caterer? Hers. The venue deposit? Gone. The custom dress fittings? Refund request denied. Greg had removed his name from all shared costs 2 days before she even opened her mouth about Kyle. Next was a notarized list titled Asset Reallocation, Revoked Access and Control. Condo lease terminated under Clause 14B with Sarah removed as co-resident. Bank accounts separated with hers frozen for review. Car title under Greg's name already resold. Wedding account closed. Funds returned to primary contributor Greg. But the final sheet was the one that shut her brain off. Stapled to the back, like an afterthought, was a glossy 4x6 photo, printed, her mid-laugh, drink in hand, surrounded by the bridesmaids, her head thrown back, mouth wide, joy on full display, a frozen moment from that stupid bachelorette video she thought was just for the girls. But this wasn't the phone footage she remembered. This was high quality, clear, angled. The caption printed underneath in simple sans serif font. Hope he shows. It was time-stamped, right down to the second. Watermarked in the corner with the name of a phone she didn't recognize. Greg backup iCloud hidden. Her legs nearly gave out. She sat down, hard, the envelope dropping to the floor. Her hands shook. Not from guilt. She'd burned through that already. This was something worse. Powerlessness. Because it wasn't just that he had the photo. It was that he'd taken it, saved it, backed it up, and waited, not to explode, but to execute. He hadn't stormed out with accusations. He'd documented, verified, filed. She thought she was in control of the narrative, that if she cried hard enough, tweeted the right thing, or framed Greg as the cold, overreacting groom, she could win the sympathy battle, maybe even spin it into a funny podcast story one day. This one time I almost married a guy with the emotional depth of a beige couch. But this was a message. The photo wasn't a memory. It was evidence. She opened her phone and stared at the gallery, hundreds of pictures, all curated for the wedding. Engagement shoots, venue walkthroughs, mood boards. Gone. The shared cloud drive no longer synced. A notification popped up. Access to shared iCloud folder has been revoked by owner. She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and slid to the floor. Screen intact. Of course it didn't break. Nothing would give her that satisfaction. And then the final touch. Her favorite kind of cruelty. Silent, structured, deliberate. A new email. From Callahan and Trent LLP. Subject, for your records. Body. Please consider this packet full and final. No further communication from Mr. Callahan will be forthcoming. All rights and assets legally resolved. This is not an invitation to reply. No signature. Just the logo at the bottom. Sarah slumped forward at the kitchen island, forehead against the granite, breathing through her teeth like she was trying to stay conscious. He hadn't just walked away. He'd built a paper trail so clear and damning it didn't need context. And now the narrative wasn't hers. It never had been. Monday morning came dressed in silence. No wedding ring, no honeymoon itinerary, no congratulatory texts, just a lukewarm coffee she brewed too early and forgot to drink, and an inbox that seemed to pulse with growing suspicion rather than routine. Sarah walked into the office dressed better than usual, blazer pressed, heels sharp, but every step felt heavier than the last. She didn't get 5 steps past the receptionist before her phone buzzed. Subject: please come by. Now. From Roger D. Roger Denton, her boss, regional VP, polished, no nonsense, allergic to drama. He'd RSVP'd yes to the wedding months ago, even sent a weirdly touching can't wait to celebrate you both email last week, the kind that now read like a eulogy. When she entered his office, the door was already slightly ajar. He didn't look up right away, just gestured toward the seat in front of him, the one clients usually sat in when they were about to be offered something big, promotions, partnerships, keynote slots. But today wasn't that kind of seat. I don't care what happened in your personal life, Roger began flatly, still scrolling something on his phone. But this kind of scandal leaking into work makes us look reckless. Sarah blinked. Scandal? He finally looked up. Don't insult both of us. He turned the phone around. A screenshot of a Slack thread. Not theirs. Someone must have taken it from the marketing group's private channel. A meme, a still frame from the video clip that had been circulating. Her face frozen in that exact moment, drink in hand, laughing. A speech bubble photoshopped beside her. Hope he shows. Below it, a caption. When your bachelorette party ends your career before your marriage even starts. Roger dropped the phone on the desk like it was contagious. I'm not here to police what you say at your parties or who you shave for, he added with barely concealed disgust. But when it becomes company hallway conversation, when clients are sending memes around, that's not optics, that's exposure. I didn't leak that, Sarah said, heat rising in her cheeks. I know, Roger replied, but you created it. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. Now, your promotion. Her spine stiffened. What about it? It's paused, indefinitely, officially due to team realignment, but let's not lie to each other. You know why. You can't, she started, but he cut her off. I can, and I have. This firm doesn't reward mess, especially not when it starts trending on platforms we advertise on. She opened her mouth again, but he lifted a hand like a stop sign. HR wants a word after lunch. No, you're not being fired yet, but you'll need to go through digital conduct retraining and review your non-disclosure clauses because, fun fact, those apply to reputational harm too. I didn't break any NDA, she shot back, desperate. Roger shrugged. Then you'll have no problem sitting through the ethics review. The door opened behind her. One of the interns poked her head in. Sorry, Mr. Denton, they're ready for the strategy call. He nodded. Send them the deck. I'll be 5. Sarah stood, clutching the strap of her bag like it might keep her upright. Roger looked at her one last time, and this time his voice wasn't angry. It was tired. You had a seat at the table. People liked you, trusted you. But now, every time your name pops up, they don't think sharp strategist or future exec. They think, oh, the one whose groom ghosted her mid-wedding weekend after she bragged about her ex. Her lip trembled. She locked her jaw. He added one last blow before she reached the door. Do you know how many qualified people would kill for the spot we almost handed you? She left without answering. Back at her desk, the office had that eerie hush that only comes when people know something but aren't sure how much they're allowed to show they know. A couple coworkers looked up and quickly backed down. One offered a smile that was more apology than comfort. She sat, turned her monitor on, and waited for it to boot. For one stupid second, she hoped maybe it would bring some sense of normalcy. An email, a task, something that didn't smell like shame. Instead, her screen lit up with a system notification. Access denied, promotion folder unavailable. Please contact your administrator. The seat she thought she'd earned, it had been pulled out from under her. Quietly, permanently. And she hadn't even realized until she hit the floor. She didn't text him directly. By then, even she had figured out it wouldn't go through. Greg had buried his digital tracks like a man escaping a crime scene he didn't commit, but no longer cared to explain. His number had been wiped, blocked, disconnected. She had tried to burn her once, briefly, stupidly, but the moment he didn't answer, the shame hit harder than the rejection. So she found a mutual friend, Jonah. College roommate. They'd gone on double dates. He was safe, she figured, neutral ground. Can you just tell him I'm sorry? She wrote. Her fingers hovered for a second. Then after a few seconds of deletion and retyping, I messed up. I was drunk. Please, let's talk. I need to explain. I never meant for any of this to happen. Jonah replied 3 hours later, delivered the message. He read it. She waited and waited and waited. Nothing. No typing bubble, no response, not even he said no, just vacuum. 2 days passed, then a knock. Not a courier this time, just a plain USPS guy. Box in hand, brown, no return address. About the size of a shoebox, but too light for anything like that. She signed and closed the door, already uneasy. Inside was bubble wrap, neatly packed, like someone had done this not in anger, but with intention. At the bottom, 3 items. Her favorite mug, the one she'd left at his place years ago when they first started dating. The one with the chip in the rim she insisted added character. Greg had wrapped it in a dish towel, hers. from the old apartment. Next, the bracelet she gave him during their first Christmas together, a cheap braided leather band with a steel plate engraved, "You make calm look heroic." She used to joke that he wore it like armor, quiet, unshakable. That's what she'd loved about him. And lastly, a single sheet of paper, "All yours." That was it. No signature, no closure. She stared at it for a long time, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by cardboard and her own breath. It felt like someone had mailed her a mirror, and everything inside it was what she'd broken. She turned the bracelet over in her hands. The engraving had worn smooth from years of contact, but the words were still there, still clear, and somehow they cut now more than they comforted, because he had made calm look heroic, even as he walked away. And now he was calm. She was noise. The next day, she opened Instagram and searched his name, not because she thought he'd post anything. He never did. Greg hated social media, but the account was gone. Deleted, blocked, she couldn't tell. She tried from a burner. Still gone. A full erasure. Not just from his life, but from the record of having ever existed in his version of it. She checked her drawer for the backup drive where they'd kept all the photos, the messages, the videos from their early days. It was gone. Maybe she left it at his place. Maybe he'd thrown it out. The silence was deafening, not because it was empty, but because it was designed. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a grudge. It was a man who had decided that letting her speak was giving her relevance she hadn't earned. She thought back to her message. "I messed up. I was drunk. Pathetic. Weak." She could still hear his voice in her head from one of their first fights, years ago, when she had deflected blame onto stress and wine. You can't keep blaming alcohol for clarity you didn't want to admit sober. Back then, she'd rolled her eyes, told him he was too serious. Now, the sentence played on a loop. She curled up on the couch, the mug on the table next to her, still faintly smelling of his house. The bracelet rested on her wrist, a dead weight. The only thing missing from the box was forgiveness. But that, apparently, hadn't been hers to keep. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. It looked like the others. Professional, cream-colored, embossed with Callahan and Trent LLP, but this one was thicker, heavier, final. It didn't come with a courier this time. Just regular post like it was any other document in her adult life that she could file, forget, or shove in a drawer marked later. She sat with it unopened for hours. The return address stared at her from the kitchen counter like a dare. When she finally slid her nail beneath the seal, she felt it before she saw it. This wasn't going to be an update. It was a conclusion. The cover letter was brief. Enclosed, please find the final disbursement and closure documentation related to the dissolution of future cohabitation and shared property arrangements. All items enclosed are legally binding, notarized, and executed under mutual contractual agreements previously signed. She skimmed, barely reading. She'd seen enough of Greg's no-contact via counsel correspondence to know it would be clinical, factual, cold. But then she got to the fourth page. Page 4. Section 14C, Clause of Intent. In the event that premarital infidelity or intention thereof is evidenced by the behavior of either party, publicly or privately, the non-offending party reserves the right to terminate all previously agreed upon future property shares, including but not limited to savings accounts, investment portfolios, pre-designated real estate claims, and access to estate trust resources. The clause may be triggered at the sole discretion of the non-offending party with no requirement for a formal explanation or mutual agreement. Enforcement may be retroactive from date of filing. The clause was dated 6 weeks before the bachelorette party, signed, stamped, executed, her full legal name, Sarah L. Bentley, his signature beneath, followed by hers. She laughed then, but not the old laugh, not the one Greg had once said made rooms feel warmer. This was brittle, almost soundless, a broken fan trying to spin. She remembered the day he brought up the idea of revisiting the prenup. They'd already signed one early in the engagement, something quick and generic that she'd barely skimmed, but he'd come back from a finance meeting one afternoon, her words, and said he wanted to revise it. Sharpen it up, he'd said, like grown-ups do. She had smirked and said, "Sure, Mr. Spreadsheet, just don't sneak in a clause about my shoe addiction." He smiled then. Only if you don't sneak in one about burning down the house. They laughed. And she never read the revisions, never cared to. She trusted him. Or more honestly, she'd never imagined she could betray him in a way that mattered. Now here it was, in black and white, all future equity shares, gone. The savings account they'd started planning for a new place, locked under his name. The investment account his uncle had opened for them as an early wedding gift, reassigned to him by trigger clause. Even the clause about the mountain cabin, his grandmother's retreat, which they'd planned to co-title after the wedding, was null. It was all there. Structured, executed, anticipated. She hadn't just been removed from the relationship. She'd been disqualified from the aftermath. She reread the phrase again. Infidelity or intention thereof. That was the part that lodged in her throat. She didn't even sleep with Kyle. She hadn't texted him, hadn't sent an invite, hadn't even seen him. It was a joke, a stupid, loud, boozy joke. But in the end, it didn't matter. Because Greg didn't need the act. He needed the admission. And she'd served it on a silver platter. Not just admitted it, celebrated it. She flipped to the appendix. Attached was the transcript, yes, transcript, of the bachelorette party video clip. Time-stamped, captioned, contextualized. The phrase, "I spent all day shaving everywhere for him," was highlighted in yellow. Next to it, evidence of intent. This wasn't revenge, it was risk mitigation. She'd always teased him for his caution, called him boring, said he was obsessed with backups and contingency plans. He'd made spreadsheets for everything, vacations, holidays, even dog sitting, and she thought it made him harmless. But Greg wasn't harmless. He was prepared. She sat on the floor with the papers fanned around her like a crime scene reconstruction. Only this time she wasn't the victim. She was the exhibit. The man she mocked for being too structured, too methodical. He had engineered her total extraction with surgical elegance. She didn't lose the house, the money, the trust. She forfeited them with one laugh, one sentence, one moment of performance. And Greg didn't even need to say a word. He'd said it all 6 weeks ago. With a signature, it had been 3.5 months, long enough that the calls had stopped, the gossip threads dried up. Her HR file was back to active, but her promotion track still sat under a quiet pending that might as well have been carved in stone. No one brought it up. No one brought her up. She existed in the office the same way a coffee stain lingers on an old carpet. Technically still there, but everyone pretends they don't see it. But she still thought about him every day, not with anger, not even shame really, just this dull, persistent hum of unfinished business. A part of her still believed, foolishly, that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't completely closed the door, that if they somehow bumped into each other, he'd stop, say something, that she'd have a chance to explain, or at least be seen again, not forgiven, not welcomed back, but seen. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, it happened. She was walking down Lexington, one of those errands and heels kind of days, caught between a dry cleaner and a headache, when she saw him. Across the street, standing outside a bookstore, beneath the overhang, holding a cup of coffee. Same posture, same quiet presence, but different somehow, lighter. He was smiling. Next to him stood a woman, not stunning, not flashy, just natural. Wearing jeans, no makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun. She was laughing, really laughing, and Greg was looking at her like she was the only person in the world who could make him do that. Something inside Sarah folded. She stopped walking, didn't care that people were brushing past her on the sidewalk, just stared. And maybe it was instinct, or maybe some desperate spark still alive in her brain, but she stepped forward. Across the street, Greg's eyes shifted, met hers, and in that brief moment, 3 seconds, maybe less, she felt it all slam back into her. He saw her. Of that, she was sure. But he didn't flinch, didn't wave, didn't smile. He didn't look sad or angry or surprised. He looked finished. Then, calmly, he turned to the woman beside him, placed a hand gently on her lower back, and guided her inside the bookstore. The door closed behind them with a soft chime. He didn't look back. Not once. Sarah stood there for another full minute. Her feet hurt. Her throat ached. She didn't cry. couldn't. There was no room for that anymore. Because what do you cry about when someone doesn't hate you? When they simply don't need you? Greg hadn't replaced her. He'd erased her. And the worst part wasn't the silence. It was the fact that it didn't seem like he'd even remembered the noise. The postcard arrived on a gray morning. No courier, no signature required delivery, just a simple piece of thick cardstock tucked among bills and marketing flyers, barely noticeable except for the fact that it was handwritten. And Sarah no longer received handwritten anything. She almost tossed it with the rest of the junk. But the handwriting stopped her, not familiar in an obvious way, but careful, deliberate. The way someone writes when they want to be understood without saying much. She turned it over. No image on the front, just soft, unbleached paper. No return address. No city stamp. It had been dropped in a local mailbox. Anonymously, the back was almost blank, except for a single sentence centered and underlined once in ink so fine it looked printed. Some endings don't deserve closure, just exits. That was it. No best, Greg. No hope you're well. No anger, no venom, not even a signature, but she knew. Of course she knew. It wasn't the kind of quote you stumble on and think, oh, this will make a cute Instagram post. It was a message, not a dagger, but a scalpel, quiet, precise, a surgical. He hadn't written it to hurt her. He'd written it to remind her this wasn't revenge. This was erasure. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, holding the card in both hands like it might start bleeding if she loosened her grip. Around her, the apartment looked the same. Too clean. Too neutral. Like a hotel suite someone never truly moved into. She glanced at the kitchen. The cabinets were still stocked with matching plates she never used. The shelf still held the unread books she bought for show. The closet still had the sage green bridesmaid dresses she couldn't return. Greg had never needed a final conversation. He hadn't blocked her out of rage. He had simply chosen not to carry her forward. That morning, she had woken up thinking, maybe just for a second, that he might reach out, that maybe time had softened things, that maybe he'd remember the good parts, the sweet parts, the human parts. Instead, he remembered the truth and offered no forgiveness, no pity, just a reminder, just exits. Sarah placed the card on the windowsill. She didn't cry, not because she'd healed, but because you can't grieve a door that never opens again. You just stare at it, quietly, until you accept that no one's behind it anymore, not waiting, not watching, not ever coming back.